Alrighty, folks, let's get this going. Welcome in everyone back to Adobe Live. My name is Voodoo Val and I am going to be your host this morning for a brand new Photoshop Foundations challenge. I'm pretty pumped for this today. It's going to be a collection of all of my most favorite and most useful tips and tricks for all of you folks jumping into Photoshop. Cool techniques that can get you started on your new projects that you're working on and things to remember that will kind of smooth your workflow out and continue to support you throughout your creative journey. Let me crank my audio up just a little bit because it looks like you folks are having a tiny bit of a problem hearing me. Can everyone hear me okay now? How's that? Hopefully that's a little bit better. I've kind of cranked you up just a bit. Hey Carol, welcome in everybody. Looking forward to a wonderful 2 weeks from Tim Loomis. Thank you so much. Just a reminder, if you folks are watching over on YouTube, if you're in the live chat for this stream and this tutorial is going to be over on behance.net/live. So please come on over here if you'd like to talk to me. If you'd like to come back and check out the replay or you want to re-review this Foundations challenge, you can always come back on Behance or YouTube and watch the archived video. So let's jump right into it. Let me pop over here. So if you take a look in the description down below the video player, you will find all the links and everything that you need to get started with me today. And the first starter file that I've prepared for you folks is this one right here, Photoshop Foundations Challenge from Hotkeys to Libraries. Join us as we explore the best tools and tricks for your workflow, as I said. And the first thing we're going to get started with today is using libraries as a color palette or a painter's palette. So whether you are an illustrator, painter, graphic designer, whatever it is that you do in Photoshop, if you're doing compositing or photo editing, whatever it is that you use Photoshop for, using the libraries for a kind of a painter's palette or a color palette is really an excellent way to move through your projects. And so as you can see here, I've got this really cool color palette picked out for you folks here, and I'm going to show you just kind of how I get ready when I start a project. So I'm actually going to push myself over to the right side of the screen just for this portion of the video, and I'm going to, I've got my brush tool selected here, but I can also do this with my paint bucket tool if I want. And what I'm going to do here just on my colors layer is I'm going to hold Alt and I'm going to go ahead and select some of these colors. Also, just a quick reminder, I've got my caps lock on, so my cursor looks just slightly different than it might look for you. If I turn caps lock off, you can see it actually turns into the eyedropper tool. So I'm just going to go ahead and select this dark blue color here, and if I open my libraries, I've created a PSDCC library for myself here, and you can create your own library. If you look at all of your libraries here, hit create new library, and then you'll be able to dive in. I'm just going to hit this plus button here, and you can see I've got that dark blue selected as a foreground color, so I can go ahead and just add it there, and it throws it into my library for me. I've got my my RGB code here, and I can just go down the line and do that and add all of my colors here that I know that I'm going to be using for my project. Now I am going to be sticking to these colors for the duration of this set of challenges, but if you'd like to choose some different colors, feel free. You never have to follow these challenges to a T. These are to get you going and get you started, but if you feel like you are inspired to deviate in any way, feel free. Welcome in General Kenobi, Frank, Ralph, Andrew, I see you in there. Good to see all you folks. Welcome in. All right, so I've got all my colors here, and we are going to, now that we've got this set up, we're going to get into creating some shapes. that we're going to use to kind of dive into some of the other tips and tricks. And you'll see I'll be able to very quickly use my little palette here to change the colors of those shapes. So I'm going to hide these squares that I've created, these cool, crispy little noise textured squares. And with my rectangle tool, I'm just going to start creating some squares. And I'm holding shift here just to keep the aspect ratio a perfect square. And I'm just going to go ahead and drag some squares out like so, like that. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and arrange these real quick. So I know that I want my larger square to kind of be on the bottom, so I'm going to drag that. Let me bump myself over to the left side here so you can see my layers. I drug this underneath all of my squares here. I know that I want my medium sized square kind of on top. I'll Control T so that I can transform this and drag this over here. And I want this little square sort of overlapping just a tiny bit, like so. And I will hold shift and select all of these layers and Control T or Command T just to, or actually I'm going to Control G or Command G to group them, and then Command T to kind of reposition these. So I've got all of my squares here. Now, if I open this group that I've made, and I select some of my rectangles and I open my libraries here, I can actually come in and just click while I have them selected, and I can recolor them like so, which makes it very, very easy. So I don't have to go into the settings for my shapes and all that stuff. It's just a very quick one tap press to change all of my elements and kind of organize them and create the colored look that I am going for. Okay, I might bump this medium size square down just like so. Okay, so I've got all my shapes. Now the next thing we are going to do is I am going to show you, this is one of my most favorite little tricks here in Photoshop, is previewing the values of our elements as we start to create them. So whether you are an illustrator or a graphic designer or, you know, a compositor or whatever it is, as I said, that you are doing in Photoshop, checking the values and the contrast between colors you're using within your project is very, very important. If you've ever been working on a project and you're looking at what you've created and you like it, but it's not quite right, chances are your values are just slightly off, and you can get a really great contrast between your colors that you are using if you have a nifty way of checking those values very quickly. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you, if you go up to View in Photoshop and go to Proof Setup and go to Custom, you can actually, if you see it right immediately, it's going to pull our entire project into grayscale. If you set this device to simulate to working gray .gain 20%, it will allow you to create kind of a custom hotkey to flip from color to grayscale instantly while you are working. So I'm just going to hit OK, and if I hit Control Y, I can go back and forth between the colors and values of my project. And while I'm working in this grayscale mode here, if I make myself a new layer quickly with Control Shift in or Command Shift in if you are on a Mac, I can grab my brush, and as you can see, I can select this. I have this this very bright green color selected. I can actually paint with this still. And when I come back into color with Control or Command Y, I am painting with the colors I'm using. So you can work with color while you are viewing the values and contrast between your shades. And you can continue to edit with the colors that you've chosen, even though you are previewing it in a non-color mode, if that makes sense. So it allows you to kind of keep an eye on those values. And as you can see here, when I'm in my grayscale view, I have a pretty good contrast, a pretty good variation of value here. And if I were to change, for example, if I were to maybe make this larger rectangle, this color here, you can see that's not really a great contrast of color there, these two colors would be very, very close together. And while in this color mode, I can clearly see that they are different colors. Not all people's eyes work the same. And so some people might have a harder time differentiating between these two very bright colors, and some people may have less trouble. But if we preview our values, we can actually come in and create a better contrast so that our work, whatever it is that we are creating, is a little more palatable to a wider variety of people. So that is one of my most favorite tips. And now next, what we're going to do is, as you probably saw in the preview, I had these cool crispy textures sort of filling all of these squares, and I am going to show you how I created that texture. You may have noticed that the brush that I'm using is a little noisy. Now, I have used a lot of textures in my work over the years. I think probably many of you have jumped into Photoshop and used an actual noise texture, whether you're creating them yourself or downloading a texture to use in your work. But for me, one of the things that I had always wanted to do is have the perfect noisy brush so that I can just tap my mouse or paint with my stylus and create a nice noisy flair for my work. And I figured out how to do that. So I'm going to come back into my color mode here, and I'm going to show you how to create a noisy brush, and you don't actually have to download any brushes at all. This is something you can do with the basic Photoshop brushes that you have available to you right when you download Photoshop. So the first thing I am going to do is I'm going to keep my little color palette open because we're going to use this. And I am actually going to rasterize my squares here because I'm going to lock the transparency, which is another little bonus tip for all of you folks. So let me right click here and rasterize these. Now what I'm going to do is this little checkerboard icon here is lock transparency, and what lock transparency means is if it's locked, I will be able to paint on these layers, but I will only be able to paint within the confines of what's already on the layer. So basically it will allow me to paint and to design, but within the lines, sort of, if you want to think about it that way. If you had some line art here, or you had some other shapes or whatever it is you work on when you utilize Photoshop, you would be able to paint within the confines here and never deviate from your original design. So I'm going to grab, I'm actually going to use my mouse for this, and I can use my stylus, but I assume that a lot of you maybe don't have a stylus, so I'm going to make sure that you know you can do this with a mouse if you choose. So I'm going to come into my brushes here, and I've just right-clicked onto my canvas with my brush tool selected, and I'm going to make sure that I am selected on one of the soft round pressure opacity brushes. This is a brush that you will have in Photoshop when you download it. No need to go anywhere else and find a brush. And I'm going to appear on mode. When you open your Photoshop, if you've never changed the modes of your brushes, yours will be set to normal. And when you use that, I'm going to make my brush larger, and I can make my brush size larger on the fly with the left and right bracket keys, by the way. I can actually come in here, if I select this bright color, I can come in here and I can, I'm just painting around with this light color, but I want to give it a noisy texture, and the way I can do that is switching it to dissolve. And so now if let's grab like this color, this kind of greenish light color. I'll make my brush just a tiny bit bigger, and now when I click, boom, I kind of have like a custom perfect noise brush for this, which I think actually has a really lovely texture. And if we zoom in here, you can see it's very fine. And I'm painting again on this layer with lock transparency, so it's not painting anywhere but within the confines of the square I already had on this layer. So I can come in and make this really lovely if I want. I can come over to my smaller, brighter square here, and maybe we'll grab this bright color and kind of click that in there just to give it a little bit of a bright hue on that corner. And then I can come over to my medium square, and we can grab, I'm thinking maybe, honestly, we can use some of this blue here And then we can add some of the darker blue to this rectangle, this almost black color here. We can kind of come in with a little bit of that. Maybe grab a slightly brighter color for this medium one. Make it a little bit lighter as we get into the center there, and then we can grab this slightly lighter color here and kind of brighten up that corner. So we have like this nice variation, and if we use our handy dandy hotkey, I can go to Control or Command Y, and continue to look at my values, and I can see here that we're getting pretty darn close to the same value regardless of color right here. So I know if I flip back into color, maybe I will grab this dark color here, flip back into values, and I can kind of tap. Let's make sure we're on that larger square. I can kind of tap there, and boom, now I can see I've got this nice contrast going, and I'm still working on color. So if I come back over to my color view, I can see that I've been editing with my blues the whole time, just keeping an eye on the similarities in value and contrast there, which I think this looks pretty cool. It doesn't look exactly like the starter file example, but you can see how you can actually get in there and create a lot of different different kinds of designs along this line. So actually I'm gonna look back at what I did. I think I had like a smaller third square there, and the colors are slightly different, but I do actually like this more dramatic look, like this little collection of pixels, which is really cool. So next on our list, because I've shared a few little tips here, but I do want to get into a few more before we take off for the day. So we've gone over using our libraries as kind of a painter's palette, a little designer's palette, which is very easy to switch between colors, so I'm not sampling constantly, which is especially great because when you're using soft brushes, even if I'm using the noise brush and things, if I were to try to sample my colors back from here, I would probably get all different kinds of colors as I'm holding Alt to access my eyedropper, and here it just keeps me right on track with the exact color palette I'm looking for. We've gone into using the grayscale hotkey, setting that up for yourself if you'd like to use that. We have done the dissolve blending mode for our brushes, and next we are going to work with using the transform tools and the move tool to get kind of a pixel perfect look. So those of you who are maybe new to Photoshop, or maybe those of you who are coming from Illustrator into Photoshop, or XD into Photoshop, you're probably used to a collection of tools that have like a very precise arrangement sort of vibe to it. And I've noticed a lot of folks, especially coming in new to Photoshop, might not realize that Photoshop also has some really excellent tools and grids and move settings within it that can help you continue to kind of achieve this pixel perfect look if you are designing more precise within it as well. So this is how I use those tools. Earlier I was doing free transform, which was just Control or Command T to move my squares around. But something that you can also do, if I close my library here and just move my canvas over. By the way, quick bonus tip, there are 3 view modes within Photoshop which you can toggle between hitting the F key. So this is the standard view here. I'm working in the second here. That gives me a little more mobility with my canvas, and you can also flip into the third mode, which removes the interface, and you can toggle it visible and invisible by hitting Tab. Which is pretty useful. So you can kind of figure out which mode is better for you. So I am going to use the move tool, which is V on my keyboard. And I don't even have to open my group with my squares. Whatever you click with the move tool, as you can see, as I'm clicking around here, over on the right hand side, you can see that it's toggling through all of the layers for me. So if you're ever working and maybe you have tons of different layers in your project, first of all, using the move tool is an excellent way to find what you're looking at, the small little detail that you are working with in the moment, point rather than cycling through all your layers and hunting for the proper layer. And what I can do here is I can move, and as you can see, as I'm moving it around with the move tool, it's starting to show me how many pixels are between this element that I'm moving and the elements around it, which is very useful. So if I zoom in here, we can really kind of get into the nitty-gritty of this. So I can bump this down. You can see it snaps it perfectly there. If that's what I'm looking for, that will work. I can also snap so that this is at the halfway mark or lined up with the top of my other square here, and it will tell me, it'll start to tell me how many pixels are between. So if I line up this square and bump this one over, I can push this over here and boom, look, let me zoom in here so we can read this easily. It'll tell me that this is 92 pixels from this element and this element if I want a perfect distance in between the two. And this is very, very useful, like I said, if you're doing kind of a pixel perfect design here. But just in case you dive in here and you're not seeing this grid, chances are you have it toggled off, and you can toggle it back on very quickly and easily with Control or Command H. So if I hit Command H, you can see that now I've hidden them from view and they're still snapping and it's still working, but I can't see them. And if I'd like to move freely without it snapping into place, I could just hold Control. And then I have kind of this free form, free moving environment here. So I'll toggle that back on. And there's one more thing actually that you can do with the move tool and with this snapping is if you've ever selected something with the lasso tool or the rectangular or elliptical marquee tool, or you've ever free transformed something, Photoshop has this UI around whatever it is you've selected or are transforming. And sometimes when you're working with very small details, those can be a little bit distracting. So if I decide that I want to transform this square, if I say Control or Command T to transform, and I'm trying to line something up and I want to get in here, get really kind of in all of these details here, and I don't want to see this outline, you can also use Control or Command H to remove that as well. And I'm still transforming. I'm still doing this. I just can't see it. So let's toggle that back on. I'll go ahead and reposition this and hit Enter to place. And I can also do that with my selection tool. So if I hit L on my keyboard to select my lasso, I'm also going to make sure I'm not on the polygonal lasso tool. I'm on the regular lasso tool. And maybe I want to select a strange shape in here, and I want to Control or Command T to transform that. And I can see all of these dotted lines and all that stuff. I can do that as well. Control or Command H, I can't see any of it now, and I can move this freely without seeing any of those little details, which is pretty darn useful if you are getting into these teeny tiny details and just don't want to see all of that extra stuff within the program. So I'm going to go ahead and Control H. I'm working on a PC, so it's Control for me, but again, if you're using a Mac, it's going to be Command, the Command key. And I am going to hit Escape so that it just kind of exits out of that transform that I did. And even if you're not transforming and perhaps you are selecting something, you know, maybe I've selected this and I'd like to add something else to my selection, you can hold Shift to add to your selection, or you can hold Control, Alt, for subtracting from it. And as you're, you know, kind of working through this, once you get whatever selection you want here, maybe you're not selecting something to transform it, maybe you're selecting because you're going to paint within this. You can actually, if I make a new layer with Control Shift in and grab my brush tool, let's grab one of our colors here. Let's grab this bright color. Maybe you're selecting because you'd like to paint within a shape. And you just want to use this shape to make an outline so that you don't paint outside. You can also hide with that. It doesn't have to be hidden only when you're using the transform tools. You can Control H or Command H to hide the selection, and I'm still selected here. I'm still painting within the borders of this shape that I have created, which is very, very useful. I'm not exactly sure what this shape is. It's kind of a strange flower, but you get the idea. So yeah, there's some little tips for you when using selection tools and the like. So I'm going to go ahead and Control H to kind of bring us back into the view here with our selection. And I'm going to go ahead and Control D to deselect, and I'm going to hit delete on this layer because we don't particularly need it. And then I may rearrange with V, selecting my move tool. I may rearrange our squares here and get them back into our cute little arrangement that I liked so much. Let me make sure there are no questions coming in. Ted says, can the measurement for the guidelines be changed to inches rather than pixels? You know, it's possible. I will sort that out and see if I can get the answer for you to that in the Discord, which reminds me, please join the Discord because there are mentors and people posting their work for these challenges in the Discord. You will not regret joining in over there. I have never had a use personally to have it be different than pixels, but perhaps. So I will look into that. Those are all of the tips that I have for you today, folks. I hope that you have enjoyed these nifty little tips, and I hope that they help you folks as you move and navigate through your creative journey. I'm going to be on the Discord today. I'm looking through and seeing if I can answer any of your questions. But that's all I've got planned for this morning. Please stay tuned if you are watching the live broadcast because the rest of our day is going to be jam-packed with more awesome streams coming up next. If you are watching the replay for this and you need to, you find that you need to go back and review the video, we always have all of our streams archived on Behance or on YouTube, so for your rewatch pleasure if that is what you wish to do. And I will see you folks tomorrow morning with another challenge. Adios, everyone.